it looked like a very, very nice business that was ultimately going to dovetail into Google 10 years ago, and each year lost a little bit of it. And while it brought the tech to the masses, it's now facing intense competition from Chinese manufacturers.
Lenders are being forced to reprice loans or taking big losses. A lot of this is concentrated in large offices in New York and San Francisco, which are trading hands well below what she paid for maybe 5, 6, 7 to 10 years ago. But there's about $1.5 trillion in commercial mortgage debt due by the end of 2025. Hi there, and welcome to Stock Club, a podcast brought to you by MyWallSt. I'm Mike, and joining me in today's episode we have MyWallSt's chief investor, Emmett Savage. To celebrate beating the market for 10 years, we have just launched 2 new products on MyWallSt, Invest and Invest Plus. Members will receive a weekly stock pitch straight to their inbox, our 10 picks to beat the market for the next 10 years, and much, much more. Just head over to mywallstreet.com/invest to find out. Today's podcast is brought to you by Vodafone Business. Now, if you're like us here on MyWallSt, you know that running a business is difficult. There are countless things to think about, and many often simply get ignored or completely forgotten about. That's where Vodafone Business can help. They've crafted a suite of tools and supports to boost your business's operations, and the best part is it's free for everyone. From cybersecurity to harnessing the power of AI, building a website and improving how your teams work remotely, Vodafone Business will help you address the often overlooked but crucial elements for your business's success. To get started today, check out their one-to-one VHub digital support and advice service. You'll find everything you need right there. Find the link in our show notes or simply Google Vodafone VHub for more details. Now let's get into today's episode. Emmett, how are we doing? Excuse my background to you and to anyone watching on YouTube. I'm recording in the bathroom at the minute because there's construction outside my window.
I wasn't sure if you're going to admit that, because we just before we went live on air, suddenly every piece of heavy machinery in what city are you in, Mike? In Biarritz. Every piece of heavy plant fired up outside his window, and he said, "I'm going into the sound studio," which turned out to be the bathroom. So live from a bathroom in Biarritz, Mike O'Mahony on microphone.
Soundproofed, yeah. I look like him in one of those hostage videos, but look, we're going to get on with this.
Go on. Here we go, live from a Jackson Biarritz.
Yeah. So to celebrate that, no, not to celebrate that, but we have a big episode coming up next week, Emmett. 200 episodes. Do you believe that?
Yeah, honestly, I believe it. But I tell you one thing, I've never listened to an episode of a podcast that my voice has appeared in, which would explain to our listeners why there's no improvement.
I was about to say the lack of quality control.
I think the best actors study their performance when they've taken every single shot and they look at every little furrow of their brow and every intonation in their voice, and I think that is the correct way to improve. But you know what? The way I improved over the years, and the audience laughs, the way I try to improve over the years is to just read a little bit more about what I'm about to talk about in advance. There you go.
Well, look, the best ability is availability, Emmett. Anyone ever tell you that?
Cheers, Mike. Shucks, you're the best.
So make sure to tune in next week, lads. We're celebrating our 200th episode with a special offer. We won't give away too much now because we're not sure exactly what it is yet, but I know it's going to be good.
The bathroom in Biarritz speaks the truth. The bathroom in Biarritz
speaks the truth. We've got a week to think about it, so it's going to be special.
It is going to be very special. We really have to. 200 episodes, that's something. Let's talk about that next week, but it really is something. We better talk about something very spectacular.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into today's show. And you came across an interesting article from the Wall Street Journal. It said, "Can IKEA save the mall?" It's the furniture giant is buying up locations across America, and says it can rejuvenate them with co-working spaces and Nordic food. I don't know if Nordic food is really the teaser that everyone wants, but
yeah. Well, actually, Nordic food is really nice if you're, in the middle of Stockholm and you're a tourist. But there you have it. I tell you, I thought it was a really, really fascinating story, which is why I pinged you a message yesterday saying let's talk about that. And it specifically, the article specifically said that the Inca Group, which is the operator of most of the world's IKEA stores, has assembled its own mall empire in recent years, from China to Europe to the United States. And it says that it wants to buy more locations and as you said, aims to diversify beyond retail. And that's really interesting because what we're looking at is a quintessentially retail brand looking over the garden fence, as it were, into other lines of expansion. And the story has layers, and I just thought it'd be a very interesting conversation between us. But before I dive into it, as is my custom, I thought a 2-minute history of IKEA would also make for some interesting
for sure, because I think
listening.
it wasn't long ago we talked about private companies we'd like to own. And I think IKEA came up a few times. So it's a really interesting business and a really interesting story. So go on, fire away there.
It is. And in fact, just on that note, I mean, it not only is it private, but all its shares are held in a charitable trust by the founder, Ingvar Kamprad. Now, I don't know the intent of that charitable trust. Is it some kind of tax vehicle, or is it in fact intended to deliver charitable purposes to society? But I wouldn't be surprised if it's the latter when you hear a little bit about the business and the man himself. So this guy, Ingvar Kamprad, founded IKEA in 1943 when he was just 17 years old. And he was selling simple goods like pens and wallets and I should say small goods, products that you could carry a load of in the basket of your bike. And he was basically from a small town called Småland in Sweden, which is a really heavy forested, stony soil kind of place. And in their own words off their website, it says hardship bred a tough, resourceful people who are expert at making the most of a little, qualities that have been at the heart, qualities that have always been at the heart of IKEA.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting a metropolis when I heard Småland there now.
Now, hey, have you ever watched any Scandi dramas on television?
Yeah, they're very,
very hard,
very dark and dour and poorly lit.
Yeah, they're dark and dour and poorly lit, but usually brilliantly written and delivered, but not that that's anything to do with IKEA. But I guess the point is you cannot infer anything from an Anglo-Saxon Romanic language into a Nordic language. There's not a single word that you go, yeah, I recognize that one. Apart from hey. Yeah, apart from hey, which is hi. But in fact, funny I should say that because I'm going to get onto that in a few minutes. Anyway, way back when in the mid-1940s, to reward him for doing well in school, Ingvar's dad gave him a small sum of money, which he used to set up a company that in 1948 started selling furniture, and the Swedish icon was born. And IKEA, by the way, is named after the initials of the founder, which is Ingvar Kamprad, IK, and then Elmtard, which is the farm where he grew up, and then Angiard, which is a nearby village, IKEA. So it was literally just an amalgamation of letters. What do you call that? Is it a palinome or acronym? Of course, it's an acronym. So everyone knows of its desire to offer products with a low price and good quality, and that's always been their thing. But in addition to that, there's 3 other dimensions that IKEA considers when it's developing a new product, which is form, function, and sustainability. And when all these 5 dimensions, as they call them, are in balance, they consider it to be a design that is democratic. And this concept of democratic design was launched at the Milan Furniture Fair in 1995, and ever since has been the tool they use when developing and evaluating products, which makes sense. And I think anyone who's shopped in IKEA, which is most people, realizes that they are effectively the characteristics: low price, good quality, form, function, and sustainability. Anyways, I'll also mention that they say on their website, and I think this, anyone who's been to IKEA in Ireland will probably recognize this, and they quote, they say, well-fed customers are happy customers. And the idea comes from something that Ingvar observed, which is people left the store at lunchtime to eat in one of the restaurants or streets in Älmhult in Sweden across the road, and it interrupted the buying process. So he realized that hungry customers buy less, or as they say on their website, and apparently what they say in the business, it's tough to do business on an empty stomach. And that's IKEA. And I think a lot of people recognize that as the IKEA they know. But to your question, the company's blueprint is now to anchor its malls with an IKEA store and to seek to pull in more would-be shoppers with additions that basically make it look like WeWork and a WeWork-styled co-working space and Nordic-themed food halls and children's play areas that are inspired by, spaces outside of a typical mall. A bit like people's need to eat, but in a slightly different direction. You know, people have a need to work. People have a need to make sure their children are safe and entertained when they're off doing the shopping. And then there's the background or the backdrop that malls have been in decline for years as customers have shifted towards local and outdoor and markets and buying online. And foot traffic to US malls, I think, was down 4% on average in 2023 from the year before, and was about 12% lower from 2019.
It's very topical at the minute as well. Just yesterday, Macy's announced that they were shutting down a lot of their stores, including the big one in San Francisco on Union Square. Yeah, so it's...
Oh, really? Oh, dear.
Yeah, so it's kind of a big statement, we'll say, for in-person retail, especially in the US.
Yeah, I met Anne-Marie yesterday for lunch, and we ended up in a big conversation about this very topic, just coincidentally, about how just the decline of in-person shopping versus online shopping. And she told me a story about a friend of hers who buys a whole ton of clothing to try on at home and then returns the items that doesn't suit, and she and I were in fierce agreement that that's a horrible carbon footprint, but it exhibits, I guess, consumer behavior that has come at the cost of old world shopping malls. And Anne-Marie and I were just chatting about how like going to a mall or shopping centre, as we'd say in Ireland, to buy a piece of clothing that you have to try on is just horrible. Well, she and I certainly don't like it. I hate it. Oh, it's such a chore. It's like putting your head outside the curtain going, could you get these in a size bigger? It's just so embarrassing. Yeah. Anyway, IKEA's Inca, which is their business, as I mentioned, opened its first mall, or meeting place, as the company calls them, in 1973. So they're not new to this, and it was in Sundsvall in Sweden, together with an IKEA store. And in more recent years, they've expanded into the real estate business, opening up a string of malls. And it says that it's actively looking to buy and develop more locations in the US. And even, for example, recently it bought a mall in Brighton in the UK, and it bought it in November of last year for £145 million, which is about $184 million. And it's already worth more. And brands operating in the mall include Apple and Zara. So this isn't just you're going to IKEA. This is going to a giant retail place that has the biggest and best brands, if you like, of the world. And the real estate analysts who looked at the Brighton example said that it's now worth about 250 million quid. They only paid 145 million quid a few months ago. So clearly IKEA are breathing life into real estate that heretofore was in decline.
So I suppose they're seeing it's almost like an activist investor in a way. They come in, they buy it, but then they also improve it immediately with their presence.
That's a very good point. And I wonder if the IKEA brand is as well bedded down in you know, well, it's extremely well bedded down in, let's say, the West, but in the East, I wonder, because they're opening malls in the Chinese cities of Shanghai and Xi'an this year. They're opening a store in India in 2025. So, I mean, truly is a global brand. I just wonder, I think with high level of safety, you could stop 10 people in Ireland or America and ask them, have they heard of IKEA, and get a perfect 10 out of 10. But I wonder if that's the case over as we move further east. But whether it is or it isn't, they're doing it, and they know the formula. They've been at it for nigh on 51 years, if the first one they did was in 73. But here's where I think it gets particularly interesting. Like this, and we open up our conversation. They've a new co-working brand called Hey. HEJ, the only word you recognize in the Swedish Scandi dramas. A HEJ apostrophe, just to be clear. So when you see it, folks, you know, oh, that's IKEA. And it's the Hey workshop is bringing traffic into the malls, and they opened their third Hey workshop in downtown San Francisco. So quite interesting. Macy's is shutting its, I presume, flagship store on Union Square, while IKEA is opening a co-working space under the Hey brand with a capacity for 500 workers. It costs $399 a month. The place is obviously fully loaded with IKEA furniture and sofas and relaxation areas, and it all sounds very familiar. And on this podcast, in episode, I'm going to say 85 potluck guests, we spoke about WeWork and their formula. But when you really think about IKEA's capabilities, its resources, its assets, its cost, it's laser focused on cost. And then what we said about breathing new life into areas that until that point were in decline, it really sounds like it could be the WeWork that actually worked. And then there's, it's true, isn't it? Like, I mean, I even like the idea of that. I'm not saying I'm a lover of IKEA furniture. I'm probably like most people. I'm a liker of IKEA furniture. It's grand, it's fine. It will do the trick until you basically decide I'm going to give this place an upgrade. But then there's the food. Yeah, we spoke about the food, and this San Francisco mall will be the first to host it's called Sola Hall, which is their new food hall concept. It's opening up in a matter of weeks, really, and it's full of Nordic cuisine, which in this case is going to be 80% plant-based and only use local suppliers. Use local suppliers, not only use local suppliers, which is a really nice customer promise. And I'm not a plant-based food guy, or at least I'm not all in on it. I really do like Beyond Meat's products and a few of the other meat substitute products, but I haven't made the full switch. But that said, the IKEA meatballs have always given me the heebie-jeebies. Have you ever
Never
tried
had them, but they look kind of creepy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They look wrong.
I'm not painting
Nordic
Nordic
food.
food.
Reassuring me.
I'm not painting Nordic food in one brush here either, but like they do a lot of pickled fish and stuff as well. I wouldn't be basing my decision to move my company into co-working space based on the fact that they have Swedish food.
Plant-based Swedish IKEA meatballs. But I always wondered what happened, where you can buy a plate of meatballs for, like, I don't even remember what it was. It was like €3.
Yeah.
It was just worrying. When I was in college, who was it? Stella Artois, they did a huge pivot where they got a bunch of MBAers to look at why their beer wasn't selling. And it was because it was too cheap. And I think they changed nothing except they tripled the price and changed strapline to reassuringly expensive. And then suddenly the students moved from Stella Artois to Munchen or Splatten or something like that, which was like 50 pence a can. But I think IKEA need to have a look at their meatballs. I'm not going to buy a meatball that's €3, but I might buy a plate of meatballs that's €8. I think that's reassuring.
Covered in jam. Yeah, lenders are being forced to reprice loans or taking big losses. A lot of this is concentrated in large offices in New York and San Francisco, which are trading hands well below what they paid for maybe 5, 6, 7 to 10 years ago. But there's about $1.5 trillion in commercial mortgage debt due by the end of 2025. Now, this is going to come up where financing is now more expensive. Property values have dipped. I think a lot of this is because of remote work. So it's making a bit of a perfect storm. And then there's a higher increase of risk of default, essentially. So what's happening in corporate real estate is quite scary, but then there's initiatives like this of repurposing existing properties and obviously seeing deals. And IKEA have seen opportunities here where it's basically going cheap. Probably what happened in Brighton, where they saw something going for 145 million. They're like, we can do a bit with this and immediately increase the value of it because nothing's happening with it. It's interesting. I think we might see more and more of this repurposing of these large corporate spaces and skyscrapers and the shopping malls and all the rest. So yeah, no, it's a good initiative to see, and it's probably necessary because it could avoid a bigger problem as well. So yeah, no, it is.
Nobody wants to live in an area or nobody wants to see a place go into decline. It just goes against human nature. You want to see vibrancy. You want the places you have to work to have this kind of lifeblood of people. It's funny because I was talking to my family last night, for example, about where we might go this coming summer. And the argument for hotels versus Airbnb was in a hotel, there's a vibrancy and there's a buzz, whereas you go to an Airbnb and it's quiet. Well, it's the family and they both have a characteristic. But when you bring that to the bigger picture and just think humans need to be around humans. And I think it's great. Like when IKEA bought a mall in London last year, traffic doubled from the year before. And when they bought the Hammersmith Mall about a quarter of its units were vacant, and now it's fully let out, and a makeover has revamped community spaces. They've added food options. They've opened the door to non-retail occupants. They have that have regular visitors. There's a gym. So when you kind of see a master plan come in, and in America, I think is a great place where master plan communities are designed with a greenfield opportunity, for example, for senior citizens, as we are going to design this from the field up. And I think IKEA are taking that kind of approach. I really admire it. I like it. I think people will be attracted into it. And the points you've made about retail and commercial are very valid. I think everybody has seen it since around the year 2020. If you'd asked me in 2019, what's the singularly safest investment that's not traded on a stock exchange, I would have said an office block in the middle of Dublin City. That would have been my answer. And we've all seen how that's played out. And I think that very dynamic has grabbed the whole world. And now I think we're looking at innovative ways to reinvigorate it. And I say hats off to IKEA. It's a company I really do admire. I wouldn't go there all that often. It's been years, but a trip to IKEA is always one that people say, yeah, I'll enjoy that. Let's go.
All right. We got a few topics to discuss. So we'll get into a bit of big deal or no deal and take them off. So this is an old one now, but it's a company you know well. You've been an investor. I think it might have been one of the original stocks. Is that right?
It was not only, well, you better tell people what it is.
I'm having a conversation before I've introduced it. And so Amazon has abandoned its plans to acquire the Roomba maker iRobot. So EU opposes deal. It was about a $1.4 billion acquisition. So Amazon are going to pay a breakup fee of $94 million to iRobot. And iRobot is going to axe 30% of its workforce immediately, as well as the chief executive leaving. So a lot going on there.
Well, it's a big deal, plain and simple, Mike. This is a big deal for iRobot. And you're right, it was one of the first stocks that we put into the Invest app. And it was one of the first stocks I invested for Horizon. And at that time, they had a visionary founder, CEO, Colin Angle. He had effectively was the pioneer of the Roomba and floor cleaning robots. And they had not only had the hardware, which is easy to copy from China, but they had a software lead and they had a strategic partnership with Google, and they were taking a map of everybody's home, which in the consent on the way in, you basically said yes. And it looked like a very, very nice business that was ultimately going to dovetail into Google. Then along came Amazon, to my own surprise, and said, we'll take that. And they they announced an intended acquisition. And as you've just said, it fell through. And iRobot was the dominant force in the robot vacuum market way back when, 10 years ago, and each year lost a little bit of it. And while it brought the tech to the masses, it's now facing intense competition from Chinese manufacturers offering like really feature-rich products at lower prices, and a nice little app that does frankly everything that iRobot used to do and can do. And despite being an innovation leader, iRobot has really fallen behind now in a lot of areas, like adopting LiDAR technology and integrated mapping functionality and all that kind of stuff. So these are strategic missteps, which if you completely ignore the fact that Amazon's planned acquisition has been canned and is basically over, there's a financial strain, and it's forced iRobot to make the drastic cuts that you've just called out, huge staff reductions. I think about 350 people are being given their cards, as they used to say, and their R&D budgets have decreased. They're abandoning entire product lines. I'm sure on this podcast over the years I spoke about iRobot's lawnmower. I can't remember what name they gave it. It still isn't available. Coincidentally, I only bought a new iRobot from iRobot as opposed to one of the copycats about a week ago, and I'm waiting its delivery. So I'm still loyal to the brand, but the fact that Colin Angle, founding CEO, has walked out the door, and the chief legal officer, a guy called Glenn Weinstein, has stepped in as the interim CEO, is just abysmal. And that's not in any way a slight on Glenn Weinstein. Angle was a visionary. And as critical and as valuable as a chief legal counsel is, they tend not to be a visionary. So frankly, it's a hot mess. It's an unfortunate mess. I'm very sorry to see it, because I thought, even the name iRobot is dead cool. Like it's cool. It's Isaac Asimov's book. It's in keeping with the I naming convention that goes with a lot of things from iBuying to iPhone, and it seems to be now very much a business that is just going to go into drastic decline. I don't think it's going to die. Of course, it's going to survive, but it really does need an injection of R&D, capital, vision, energy, and I think it's a real pity. So it's a very big deal, and I think it's a shame.
Yeah, at first glance, you're looking at Microsoft investing in OpenAI the way it has, or buying Activision Blizzard, and you're like, how can a tiny 1.4 billion Hoover acquisition get blocked? But then when you think about what iRobot actually does and the way it maps its users' homes, and then you're like, where are you giving that information to Amazon, which has so much information already on its customers and the retail landscape, and then also the smart home stuff and the Ring doorbells and all the rest. And it kind of, you do see the sense in it, but yeah, it's a disaster for iRobot for sure.
Right, let's turn the tables around, Mike, and I have something far more current for you, and it's that Tesla's nemesis and rival BYD has launched an electric supercar that they intend to go head to head with Ferrari. I laugh, but look, sure, there's no point in laughing. It's the real deal. It's a $235,000 car. Have you looked at it? And is it a big deal or no big deal?
Yeah, not really a big deal for me at first glance. This is quite topical because I was just off with Riley last month. He's the EV expert in Ireland, who's big fan of BYD. I was also pitching Ferrari last week or the week before. Also doing a little more work for our Invest Plus members, so we'll see that soon. So there's a lot of ways we could go with this. I think it actually. The fact that Ferrari is mentioned as much as BYD in this article showcases Ferrari's brand equity, I think. So there's loads of supercars. None of them are Ferrari. I'm going to put this in the same bracket. But this story isn't really about Ferrari. I think it's just thrown in there. I think it's about BYD. So let's talk BYD and the cars. The car is called the U9. It's actually going to be marketed under its luxury brand called Yangwang. If you're in my head that's obsessed with performance, maybe the Ferrari comparisons are fair. It can reach a top speed of 309 kilometers an hour and gets to 100 kilometers an hour in 2.3 seconds, which is comparable to Ferrari models. But for people who are going to spend 250 grand on a sports car, I think they're going to lean towards a big red Ferrari over a U9 Yangwang, unless they already have quite a selection.
You're dead right. Yeah. When you think about the cult of luxury products, like you wouldn't value a €5,000 Cartier watch if you knew they had a $100 watch at the other end of the counter. Yeah. And that's the thing. Ferrari, its starting price, I don't even know what it is. It's probably 200 grand. So like you don't join that club unless you basically are 6'7", your height when you're standing on your wallet. Yeah.
But yeah, no, in general, it does raise some interesting questions around, and I've broached these as well in the kind of research I've been doing with Ferrari, whether it's going to be able to recreate the performance and the je ne sais quoi and everything else that goes into a Ferrari when they inevitably bring out their electric versions. And that's one that's yet to be answered. So obviously, it's a flex for BYD to be able to say, yeah, we're able to produce this kind of performance from an electric battery and all the rest. Does it change the investment thesis for BYD? I don't think so, but I think the 3 million cars the company sold in 2023 is the investment thesis, and it's bringing in, you're going to notice a lot more ads in Ireland around BYD. It's a very nascent European expansion. It looks like it's set to kick off. It's already a beast in China. I don't know what will happen in America. I would be surprised because the automotive industry in America is kind of that like core, economic pillar, I suppose, that a lot of America was based on, especially middle America. I don't see them letting a Chinese manufacturer kind of have full access, but who knows? There's also a much slower pickup on electric vehicles in America than the rest of the world. So, yeah, we'll see. But it's cool that the car goes fast. But if you're interested in BYD, this isn't why you'd invest. It's fine. But yeah, and it doesn't have a whole lot to do with Ferrari, bar the fact that you asked the question, can Ferrari do what it does in an electric version?
Exactly. It was funny yesterday when I went down to see Anne-Marie. I found myself admiring a BYD, which was the first one drove past. I thought the style was nice. It was lovely and shiny, clearly brand new. And I think that's the way a brand creeps into your consciousness. I think there's a rule of thumb that you need to see a brand or experience a brand 7 times before it's stuck in your head. And I think I've probably hit 7 at this stage. Yeah. But you're right. I don't think it can stand for luxury. It's impossible for a brand to stand for luxury if it also stands for the every person car. And that's why I totally agree with you. It's not a big deal, certainly not for Ferrari.
But just a quick reminder, folks, from Vodafone Business sponsors of the Stock Club, check out their free one-to-one digital support and advice service today to discuss a range of topics from social media tips, cybersecurity, building a website for your business. Search Vodafone V-Hub or click on the link in the show notes. Right, Emmett, after I rudely interrupted you.
No, sorry, I was just too excited. Mike, while you're in the jacks there, we have an email from a listener, Stephen Lynch, a longtime friend and subscriber from MyWallSt, who's here in Ireland, and he highlighted a stock that caught his eye that we thought we'd dive into for a few moments, and it's well, I thought you might, because I haven't looked at it in any great depth at all, but it's a $3 billion New York Stock Exchange listed company called Adient, and they are the global leader in making car seats, of all things. And they have a whole load of metrics that Stephen pointed out look really good. Price to earnings growth, or PEG ratio, less than 1.2. Its forward price to earnings ratio is under 15. Its share price is 60% off its high. But it's done $15 billion in sales in 2023 across 29 countries. So we have a $3 billion business that's profitable that did $15 billion in sales in 2023. Talk to me.
Yeah. So what Stephen did, and this should be, I think, the template for any other listener questions, is he did most of the research for us. So now I can just repeat what he said and sound smart. So, as you said, they're the market leader in car seats and interiors like that. They're decent valuation, sitting way off all-time highs, growing earnings, nice returns on capital, decent cash flow, spending a lot on CapEx, which depends on management. I haven't looked into them enough to really know, but doesn't have to be a bad thing, doesn't have to be a good thing. Most importantly, based in Ireland, although I don't think we can claim them. I think they're about as Irish as Facebook is Irish, which, depending on who you ask, if you ask the Tasman, it's very Irish anyways, but that's another conversation. But when you look at companies, you always kind of compare them to something you've researched before, So there was an old MyWallSt stock called Gentex. Do you remember them?
Yes, very well. Yeah. Love that business.
So they made mirrors and sensor technology and that kind of stuff. And a very important small part of the wider automotive supply chain. There's nothing sexy about it, but a very successful stock that's been going since the 80s, I believe. So if you own that long term, you'll be doing very well. Adient hasn't seen that same historic success. It's only been public for the last 8 or 9 years, but holds that similar significance of this very important small cog in a much bigger machine. Do you know what I mean? So recently it took a big hit there with the United Auto Workers strike. And in general, if you're looking at a stock like this, or any kind of supplier stock as part of this wider supply chain, their growth is going to basically mirror the industry. So, if you look at the amount of cars sold and the growth rate and compare it to Adient's revenue growth rate, it's almost like for like. So it's not going to be up and to the right in terms of revenue. It's going to be choppier. It's not a growth stock by any means, but it has that strong market leader position, very diversified customer base of all the world's largest car makers. It actually, throughout the United Auto Workers strike, was more protected than, say, American suppliers because its customer base was so diversified, which is great when you're dealing with customers that are much bigger than you. It's great having large companies like Google or Facebook or Tesla or whoever being your customers, but they also have an awful lot of power. So the fact that Adient didn't have to rely too much on like the big Americans like Ford and GM throughout this strike meant it didn't suffer as much as, say, comparable businesses. So yeah, sitting at a decent valuation, I could see it appeal to a certain type of investor for sure. Especially, so global car sales, we were saying that global car sales are pretty much matched up to its revenue, word for word. So they're set to increase by roughly 30% by 2030. So Adient kind of has no choice but to grow with it, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's got a pretty serious buyback program at the minute. Bought back 100 million shares in its most recent quarter at around a $3 billion valuation. So it bought up about 3% of the company. If you own 100 shares, you kind of now have 103. If that makes sense, that's how you should think of value of buybacks and how they work. So it's pretty serious dent in that. Bit of debt in the balance sheet, but about 1 billion in cash too, and it's paying down quite a bit of the debt there as well. So I don't think there's much outlying risk when it comes to leverage. So all in all, yeah, a decent company there, decent value play. Nothing exciting, won't set the world alight, but yeah, not a bad one there from Stephen.
I had a look at its 10-year revenue growth rate, and its 10-year revenue compounded annual growth rate is minus 3.8%. So everyone's favorite thing, describing a graph, it's going down a little bit year on year, just a tiny bit. But it's funny, but as you said, between Gentex and now Adient and Autoliv, another Swedish giant, wonderful business that does safety restraints, safety belts. Like, we have the makings of a car here, Mike. I think we have all the company names we need to go off and basically start a car company. We know who's going to do the seats, the safety belts, the next tech for the windscreens, which is also Autoliv. Gentex, they even have like kind of windows that go black and white if you just flick a switch. I think we can do something with this, Mike. There's a lot there. Cummings for the end.
That's how it works. Once you know the suppliers, it's all in place.
Just stick it all together. Okay, Mike. That is that. Have we to say something? Go in and talk to Vodafone.
Yeah, we'll give them a quick thank you, as we always do. If you're a business owner in need of a leg up when it comes to your digital transformation, get yourself over to the Vodafone V Hub to book your appointment today. You can find the link in the show notes for more details. So thanks for listening, Emmett. Thanks for joining. We'll make sure to have a bigger party next week for the big 200. If you, like Stephen, have any elevated pitches you'd want us to tackle, make sure to get in touch. On Twitter at MyWallStHQ, on TikTok at MyWallStreet, simply just email us at pod@mywallstreet.com. Leave us a review, tell your friends about us, and we will talk to you next week.